In 1975, the United States National Academy of Sciences published a report on a single plant species. They called it a supermarket on a stalk. The plant produced 5 different edible parts: pods, seeds, leaves, flowers, and tuberous roots. The mature seeds contained up to 42.5% protein, more than soybeans. The report recommended that a major development effort be undertaken immediately. Within 6 years, the plant had been introduced to over 70 countries. Scientists held international symposiums and built research institutes. 50 years later, most people have never heard of it. Why? In this video, we'll find that out. This is the winged bean, Psophocarpus tetragonolobus, and what happened to it reveals how crops that don't fit industrial agriculture disappear regardless of their nutritional value. The plant grows as a climbing vine reaching 3 to 4 meters in height. The pods are 15 to 22 centimeters long with 4 wing-like ridges running lengthwise. When harvested young, they can be eaten raw or cooked with a flavor resembling asparagus or peas. In Southeast Asian markets, the pods appear in stir-fries and salads. Once the pods mature fully, the seeds inside contain between 29.8% and 42.5% protein depending on variety. Soybeans contain approximately 35 to 40% protein. The winged bean matches or exceeds that level. The seeds also contain 14.8 to 21.3% oil, comparable in quality to peanut oil. The amino acid profile is nearly identical to soybean. The leaves are edible and contain 10 to 15% protein when fresh. In studies of dried leaves, protein content reached 33.7%. Young leaves and shoots taste slightly sweet and can be prepared similarly to spinach. The flowers, which are pale blue, contain 10 to 15% protein and taste similar to mushrooms when cooked. The most distinctive feature is the root system. The plant develops tuberous roots containing 8 to 20% protein. Regular potatoes contain approximately 2% protein. Cassava contains 1.36% protein. The tubers have a nutty flavor and can be boiled, baked, or fried. The seeds can be processed into milk similar to soy milk, but without the characteristic bean flavor. 5 foods from one plant, every part edible, all parts protein-rich. Beyond human consumption, the stems and leaves are used as cattle forage in Bangladesh. The husks in Papua New Guinea highlands are fed to domesticated pigs. The plant serves as a cover crop to suppress weeds and as a restorative crop, improving nutrient-poor soil through nitrogen fixation. The plant is not new. Communities in Papua New Guinea have cultivated it for centuries. Highland tribesmen valued it enough to hold harvest celebrations called sing-sings. The number of varieties and their use in tribal ceremonies suggest cultivation has occurred for centuries. Throughout Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Myanmar, and parts of India, it has been a garden vegetable for generations. Western researchers simply didn't know about it. The earliest written record comes from Dutch naturalist Rumphius, who lived in the South Moluccas from 1653 to 1702. He documented that the plant had been introduced recently to the island, probably from Java. In 1971, researcher Psophocarpus published findings on winged bean cultivation in Ghana. In 1976, Dr. Tanveer Khan documented extensive genetic diversity in Papua New Guinea, identifying 121 distinct varieties. That same year, researcher Wong published studies from Malaysia. In 1973, a review by Macefield discussed the agricultural potential. These scattered reports reached the United States National Academy of Sciences. In October 1974, the Academy convened a select committee in Airlie, Virginia. Their task was to identify underexploited tropical plants with agricultural potential. They examined 36 species. The winged bean stood out. The 1975 report was direct. It stated that a major development effort be undertaken and described the plant as an exceptional legume with pods, leaves, and seeds rich in protein and vitamins, plus tuberous roots that were among root crops, uniquely rich in protein. The phrase supermarket on a stalk appeared because the plant combined characteristics of the green bean, garden pea, spinach, mushroom, soybean, bean sprout, potato in a single organism. The international response was immediate. The Philippines hosted the first international symposium in 1978. Sri Lanka hosted a second symposium in 1981. The National Academy of Sciences published an updated report that same year, noting the plant had been introduced to over 70 countries. A newsletter called The Winged Bean Flyer was established and distributed to approximately 1,000 researchers across more than 60 countries. In 1982, Sri Lanka established the Winged Bean Institute in Kandy. National research programs launched in the Philippines, Indonesia, and Sri Lanka. The New York Times called it a potent weapon against malnutrition. The Christian Science Monitor compared it to a butcher's pig, noting you could use everything. The protein levels were verified through laboratory analysis. The amino acid profiles were confirmed. The nutritional claims were accurate. Scientists were documenting real characteristics. Then the plant failed to spread beyond backyard gardens and subsistence farms. The primary obstacle was photoperiod sensitivity. Winged bean is a short-day plant that flowers only when day length drops below 12 hours. In tropical regions near the equator, day length remains relatively consistent. In temperate regions, this creates a fundamental problem. During summer, when temperatures are warm enough for growth, days are too long. The plant produces only leaves and vines, no flowers or pods. By the time fall arrives and day length shortens enough to trigger flowering, frost kills the plant. A study in Ghana demonstrated this effect. Plants of the same variety took anywhere from 40 to 130 days to flower depending solely on planting date and day length. This restricted the plant to a narrow geographic band between 20 degrees north and 10 degrees south latitude. Japanese researchers in Okinawa developed one exception. They bred a variety called Urizun from Malaysian stock. Urizun could flower in 65 days even under 14-hour photoperiods, half the time required by standard varieties. Despite this achievement, Urizun remained an outlier. The second obstacle was growth habit. Winged bean grows as an indeterminate climbing vine requiring support structures. Flowers and pods appear unpredictably along the vine. This makes mechanized commercial farming difficult. Staking is essential for high yields. The third problem was germination. Seeds take approximately 11 days to emerge from soil under natural field conditions. Early seedlings grow slowly and are vulnerable to weed competition for the first 4 to 6 weeks. The seeds themselves have hard coats requiring scarification or hot water soaking before planting to improve germination rates. The fourth issue was the pods themselves. The wing structures are extremely fragile. This makes commercial handling and shipping difficult compared to standard beans. The fifth and most damaging problem was promotional overreach. Development organizations in the 1970s distributed materials citing maximum yield figures without adequate context. Vegetable pods could yield up to 35 tons per hectare. Tubers 5 to 15 tons per hectare. Leaves 8,000 kilograms per hectare in 60 days. What the materials often failed to clarify was that these yields were mutually exclusive. Maximizing tuber production requires removing flowers, which eliminates pod production. Maximizing pod production prevents aggressive leaf harvesting. The plant's resources are finite. Promotional materials distributed seeds to development projects worldwide, often sending varieties unsuited to local day length. Organizations sent tropical short-day varieties to temperate regions. Farmers planted them in climates where photoperiod prevented flowering. Results were disappointing. Disillusionment followed rapidly. The pattern repeated across continents. In Florida, home gardeners planted seeds expecting the miracle crop described in promotional materials. The vines grew vigorously through the long summer days, climbing trellises and producing abundant foliage. Then came September, October, November. The plants finally flowered as days shortened, But the first frost in December killed everything before pods could mature. The same story played out in California, in parts of Africa outside the tropics, in southern Europe. Even in suitable climates, problems emerged. The plant requires well-distributed rainfall exceeding 150 centimeters per year and thrives with 250 centimeters or more. It is sensitive to both moisture stress and waterlogging. The timing has to be precise. In Thailand, where the plant is grown commercially, farmers face a production constraint. The sensitive photoperiod limits year-round production, causing price fluctuations. Growers typically sow seeds at the beginning of the rainy season. The plant flowers in October through November, creating a 2 to 3 month harvest window. Pod production decreases by March. The plant dries, leaves fall, and growers stop irrigation because pods are no longer produced. Meanwhile, researchers who understood the plant's requirements achieved impressive results. In Malaysia, solidly trellised branching cultivars produced vegetable pod yields up to 35 tons per hectare over a 25-week growing period. Traditional farmers in Papua New Guinea highlands harvested tuber yields equivalent to 11.7 tons per hectare using village farming methods. At experimental stations in humid tropical conditions, the plant outperformed other legumes. But these successes occurred in specific contexts with appropriate varieties, suitable climates, and knowledgeable growers. The gap between potential and practical large-scale adoption remained wide. After the initial wave of activity in the 1970s and early 1980s, research funding became inconsistent. The Winged Bean Institute eventually closed. International symposiums stopped. The Winged Bean Flyer ceased publication. However, the plant remained in cultivation in its traditional regions: Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, parts of India, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Ghana, and Nigeria. In Papua New Guinea, highland communities continued holding harvest sing-sings. At the annual Goroka show, which can attract over 100 tribes, winged bean still appears as a culturally significant food. The plant never entered mainstream agriculture outside these traditional areas. It remained in home gardens and village plots. The largest commercial operation on record was 25 hectares in Thailand. In the drought year of 1979, those fields produced only 600 to 1,400 kilograms per hectare. One researcher named William Erskine spent his Ph.D. in the 1970s studying winged bean genetics at the University of Papua New Guinea. He later directed a lentil breeding program at the International Center for Agricultural Research in the dry areas for 18 years. He assumed his winged bean research was finished. In the 2000s and 10s, Erskine became involved with food security projects in Timor-Leste through the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research. The projects, called Seeds of Life and Agricultural Innovations for Communities, aim to improve nutrition through crop diversification. Over 2 decades of testing, 19 new crop varieties were developed. 3 were winged bean. In 2023, these 3 varieties were officially released at a ceremony attended by President José Ramos Horta of Timor-Leste. One of the released varieties was a line Erskine had identified during his Ph.D. research 50 years earlier. The Agricultural Innovations for Communities project entered its second phase, scheduled to run until 2027, with high-protein winged bean as a key driver of crop diversification research. In Nawantu, March 2024, researchers published the first chromosome-level genome assembly of winged bean in Nature Communications. They sequenced a Malaysian cultivar called Ma3, mapped all 9 chromosomes, and analyzed genetic diversity across 130 worldwide accessions. The genome spans approximately 569 to 586 million base pairs. In August 2025, another team published a telomere-to-telomere genome assembly of nearly 698 million base pairs containing. The assembly achieved 97.6% BUSCO completeness. These genomic resources provide tools for identifying genes controlling photoperiod sensitivity and growth habit. a commercial market developed independently. According to 2024 market analysis, global winged bean chip sales reached $1.42 billion. Asia-Pacific accounts for 41% of that market, approximately $582 million. Thailand, Indonesia, the Philippines, and India are the primary markets. The overall market is projected to grow at 8.7% annually, potentially reaching nearly $3 billion by 2033. Research continued in other areas. In November 2025, scientists published findings showing winged bean pod extract demonstrated anti-cancer and anti-inflammatory properties against colorectal cancer cells. The extract showed high phenolic content at 237.33 milligrams gallic acid equivalent per gram and flavonoid content at 180.53 milligrams quercetin equivalent per gram. In June 2024, Thai researchers published studies on tuber development. The varieties W099 and W018 produced pod yields of 23.6 and 18.36 tons per hectare respectively, with tuber yields of 15.20 and 15.5 tons per hectare. The tubers showed protein content of 20.92% and 21.04%. In 2025, Indonesian researchers in Aceh province tested winged bean seed flour in biscuits for breastfeeding mothers as part of a childhood stunting reduction program. The plant was not erased. It was promoted beyond its actual agricultural niche in the 1970s, failed to meet unrealistic expectations in unsuitable climates, then settled into the role it can actually fill. That role is substantial. Winged bean is a protein-rich, multi-use crop suited to tropical small-scale farming, home gardens, and regional food systems in hot, humid climates. It performs well in areas where soybeans struggle with excessive rainfall and tropical diseases. The plant fixes nitrogen in soil through promiscuous nodulation across diverse tropical soil types. Some plants in Malaysia develop up to 440 nodules with a combined fresh weight of 800 kilograms per hectare. It improves soil fertility while producing food. It tolerates drought once established and resists diseases that affect other legumes. At the research station in One, Nigeria, winged bean was the most promising among 6 grain legume species for nodulation, pest and disease resistance, and yield. The 1975 National Academy of Sciences report was accurate regarding nutritional value. The protein levels were real. The multi-use nature was real. The potential to improve nutrition in tropical regions was real. The error was assuming that effective crop for the tropics meant global soybean replacement. With modern genomics and improved breeding tools, development can proceed with realistic goals. Researchers are identifying quantitative trait loci for architectural and nutritional traits. Varieties are being developed for specific regions and uses. The $1.42 billion chip market demonstrates consumer demand exists. The Timor-Leste varieties demonstrate breeding programs can produce practical improvements. The genome sequencing provides a roadmap for accelerated development. 50 years after supermarket on a stalk, winged bean remains in cultivation, not as a global commodity, but as a protein source with a defined role in tropical agriculture and food security. In Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, Thailand, and across the humid tropics, in the regions where winged bean actually thrives, it provides protein, produces multiple foods from one plant, fixes nitrogen in soil, and grows in conditions where other protein crops fail. That is not erasure. That is function within appropriate context. The plant found its actual level of utility, and in that capacity, it continues to serve the populations that have cultivated it for centuries.